the challenge that we're confronted with right now is that there are many false prophets, there are many charlatans, there are many wannabes in this industry. And certainly, and I'm sure at some point in our podcast, we're going to talk about it, but certainly I've noticed that everybody, especially on social media, everybody's suddenly an expert in artificial intelligence. And I know some of these people personally and professionally, and I'm just wondering how overnight people are suddenly all experts when it comes to artificial intelligence, and they're running webinars and they're conducting training sessions and also giving lectures, etc. And I think we had that similar phenomenon. I don't know how intensive the lockdown was of COVID-19 in Zimbabwe, but in South Africa, as I think you understand, was quite extreme. And also during that time, I noticed that suddenly everybody during that time was an expert in remote working. Everybody was an expert in improving productivity levels, working from home, and employee wellness, occupational health and safety, and global pandemics, and even the science behind this sort of global pandemic. But nevertheless,
thank you so much, Dr. Charlse Cotter, for gracing me on this podcast, which is called ICT Minds Podcast. So basically, it's a platform for me to chill with the coolest people in the world that I usually meet on LinkedIn. So I would have a chat with them, pick on their brains, and exchange ideas. I'm big on networking, collaboration, and when I got to learn about you through Nicholas Geza on LinkedIn, I just said I'll be learning so much from Doctor, and I went on your LinkedIn and on your LinkedIn company page, and I've been learning since then. But for an audience who doesn't know you, please just give a brief introduction about yourself and what you do.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks, Admire. Lovely introduction, and thanks for the invitation to be part of your ICT Mindset podcast. I really do appreciate the invitation. So where do I start? My name is Charlse Cotter, as you said, based in Pretoria, South Africa. Been in the training industry for the last 24 years. And of those 24, at my 20s, as an independent contractor. So I'm very blessed and privileged to, partner with a whole lot of different organizations, working for myself. And essentially, there are two core markets that I play in, the in-house training market, but also the public training market. And of course, Nicholas Geza from Knowledge Integration Web is one of the many training providers that I've been blessed to partner with over the last 20 years. So I think maybe just for starters, Admire, that's maybe just a good introduction. And I think during the course of the podcast, we will sort of get to know each other quite well.
Perfect. Without wasting any time, please dive into the ideal person you assist to resolve the challenges they face through your training and facilitation. Because when I looked at your 5 pillars, it sounds like you have a wider audience, but based on where you are standing, who do you exactly assist?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Admire. Very good question. So if I can just turn the clock back, so 24 years, just the turn of the century, when I started out in training, I was really thrown into the deep end, and I was asked to facilitate a junior management training program. So although I had about 4 or 5 years of middle management experience, I had very limited training experience. So it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, although very daunting, intimidating initially. But over the years, I was gradually able to work myself up through the different management training ranks. So starting out at the supervisory junior management level, middle management, senior, and more recently done a lot of work in executive management training, etc. So I think you spoke about those 5 pillars. So I think the very first pillar, which is, I think, the foundation of my business portfolio, and that's, of course, management and leadership training. And I'm very proud to say, the training that I offer cuts across all the different management levels that I've mentioned. If I just look at some of the other pillars, we're looking at things like something which I've become very passionate about over the last 7 or 8 years, and also backed up with a lot of workplace research, a lot of academic research, is human resources management. So I'd position that as my second pillar. But obviously, my area of specialization, where I would like to believe I can make differentiation and add, like you said, significant value, is the repositioning of human resources management as what I would call a strategic performance advisor. So I do a lot of work currently at Maya in the space of strategic human resources management, HR business partnering. In fact, as recently as last week, I facilitated a 3-day strategic HR business partnering online learning program. There were a couple of people on, online, in person. So I think that today they call it a hybrid learning program, which is a new concept to me. But that's definitely some area that I do focus on, and just subordinate to that, do a lot of training in terms of HR metrics as well, HR metrics and scorecarding. So I think there's a big need for that. So typically in terms of your target market that you referred to, I would say management and leadership at any kind of level. And then also HR professionals, especially those at a management level. So your chief HR officers, your business partners, and anybody who has that strategic ambition of repositioning the traditional and transactional perception of HR so that you can become more transformational and ultimately more strategic. And then very briefly, the other pillars which consumes less of my training time. So I wouldn't say that they are primary in terms of my business portfolio and my value proposition. But nevertheless, I do some work, in particular for Nicholas, strategic learning and development. That was a conference that I spoke at about 2 months ago. But I don't know, in the industry, I find that there is less of a demand for that particular program, strategic learning and development. And also then similar to HR, I do a lot of work in terms of the metrics of learning and development. And I think we know the primary metric there, of course, is training ROI. So there's a lovely 2-day training program where we look at measuring, calculating, and also reporting on the training return on investment. And then, of course, business communication. I would say that's my fourth pillar. Although over the last, I'd say 2 or 3 years, maybe even post-COVID-19, I could probably argue that I've done less work in business communication. But I think things like report writing, presentation skills, interpersonal communication skills, I think that's, in fact, next week I have a program, funny enough, a 1-day program, which speaks to interpersonal skills. But I wouldn't say that's my core business at the moment. And then the fifth and final pillar is, of course, it's often referred to as soft skills, although I think there's a bit of a negative connotation to soft skills. So I prefer the term power skills. And there I'm looking at some of the leadership behavioral competencies. And I think the one right at the top of the list is emotional intelligence. So I do a lot of training recently in the space of emotional intelligence, and also I think similar skills, things like conflict resolution, and also I've recently, I'd say post-COVID-19 again, doing work in the space of negotiation skills, and also a program that's very popular and it can be done as a 1 or 2-day program, and that's, of course, performance-directed workplace coaching. Because I think at Maya, you'll understand that this is an area that managers are grappling with. And I think sometimes organizations say to me, look, can you do a 2-day program? Day 1 is mentoring and day 2 is coaching. So the two tend to go hand in hand, although sometimes we do just separate them. But I would say, in terms of my scope of work, that would be probably very broadly, that would be the areas that I essentially focus on. And like I said, I'm very proud to say that I can do it at entry level, so grassroots level, for newly appointed supervisors, but also all the way through to people that operate at boardroom level. So I think it's part of my differentiation, and it's contributed to my longevity in this highly competitive, ultra competitive, cutthroat training and development industry, because there's a lot of trainers out there. You can imagine just in Gauteng province alone, I think we're probably saying there's tens of thousands of trainers, and they're all competing for the same piece of the pie.
This Very true. Very true. So, can you go into differentiating between mentoring and coaching, as you were explaining earlier, that the first day can be
Yeah.
mentoring, then the second day can be
Yes.
coaching? What is the
Yeah.
difference?
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest with you, my research has shown this is now across the African continent. So, just for your viewers, when I talk about my research intelligence, it's cuts across 13 African countries. That's Southern, East, and also West Africa. So, obviously, Zimbabwe, for example, would be a very prominent research footprint. Um, but my research across those 13 African countries has shown that there are 9 fundamental differences between mentoring and coaching. And I don't want to bore you and your viewers with these five, these differences. So I don't know if I could maybe share, maybe just in the chat box, maybe just share the link with you where we can access the image. But essentially, if I just had to, in one sentence, define the difference between mentoring and coaching, I would say that ultimately, the mandate of mentors, a mentor will make you a better person and a coach will make you a better practitioner. Because I believe that mentors focus on holistic development. So they're not just going to look at your current role and your professional development. They can look at your career development. They can look at your personal development. They can look at social development. And I think if I could just maybe use the term, I'm putting it in inverted commas, the relationship between a mentor and a coach is very different. The dynamic is very different. I think the relationship with a mentor would be a lot more intimate, whereas a coaching relationship would be a lot more clinical, because mentors typically are anecdotal. A mentor, I think you've probably had many mentors in your career. A mentor would probably tell you stories. They would say, admire, when I was in your predicament, when I was in your situation many, many years ago, this is what I did. The currency of coaching is very different. A coach will be analytical. A coach will tell you, listen, admire, in your current job description, your current performance plan agreement, in terms of the standard operating procedure, this is what you need to do, X, Y, and Z. There's no storytelling, and it's very much performance directed to your current role. But where I think a mentor would be more holistic with your developmental pathway, and they would say to you, admire, look, how's things at home? How's your mental health? How's your relationships with your colleagues at work, at home, etc. And they'll also look to the future, whereas a coach, I think, would really be more narrowly focused on your current role. But like I said, I'll gladly share that image and even the literature. You spoke about LinkedIn earlier on. I wrote an article and published it on LinkedIn a few years ago, just reciting those 9 fundamental differences. So you can just guide me, Admire, as to how your viewers can get that, because I've just given them the executive summary. But maybe we can just post the link to the article in the comment section. I presume you're going to publish the podcast on YouTube.
Yes.
And alternatively, maybe we can just paste the image in the chat box as well. If people, are in a rush and don't have time to read through the article, they just with one snapshot, they can get a visual impression of those 9 fundamental differences. I don't know how you want to play it, but there is, for me, although there are similarities, you'll see the image. I do make the footnote there that the common denominator between mentoring and coaching, because they're not mutually exclusive. They do complement and support one another. And for me, the fundamental difference is, I've mentioned those, but the similarities are quite distinctive in the sense that they both try to bridge the developmental gap between book smarts and work smarts. So I don't know if it's true in Zimbabwe, but in South Africa, one of the biggest, let's call it educational challenges that we're having right now is to bridge what we would call the work readiness gap. So that is what we teach people at university, even at postgraduate level, and what the real skills that they need in the job market. And I think some of the research in South Africa in particular has shown that at undergraduate level in particular, this work readiness gap is as much as 9 months. So I think for me, this is where mentoring and coaching complement one another because they are both geared towards just bridging that work readiness gap and closing that gap between book smarts, what we teach people in textbooks at universities relative to the real working world, the work smarts. So although, like I said, there are those 9 fundamental differences, I wouldn't necessarily say that they are mutually exclusive. There are, like I mentioned, there are also similarities. And, this is why I don't know if it's true in Zimbabwe as well, but in South Africa, we have a lot of people in the industry that almost kind of use the terms interchangeably. They always tend to go hand in hand, mentoring and coaching. But for me, as a manager in particular, when you put your mentoring cap on, it's very different to the coaching cap.
Thank you for explaining, and I can relate to your definitions and descriptions because as a mentor would ask you from everything that's happening in your life is involved, but the coach is concerned with can you now code? Can you now produce a product? Can you now write a proper report, like specific things?
Yeah.
And they don't care whether you came from a shabin or a nightclub into work. They don't care. They just care like, can you do today's work the right way?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
That's exactly how I see it as well. Yeah. I mean, the time frame, like you've correctly pointed out, the time frame is very different. Mentoring is medium to long term. I mean, I think even today, like I said, I've been in the training industry for 24 years, but I still have some mentors, although they're not in the foreground of my life, they're in the background, they're in the shadows of my business performance, but they're literally one WhatsApp message away, and they can be reactivated and they'll gladly assist with any kind of advice. But like you correctly said, a coach is pretty much short-term focused and is relative to your current position, your current role. A coach is not really that interested in your future career prospects. They're only interested in performance delivery in the short term.
Dr. Charlse, as we look at the industry now, we have vast amounts of knowledge from social media platforms, podcasts, the web itself. Now we are at that dangerous point in time where one can consume maybe a series of podcast playlists and come out calling himself a coach or a mentor, right?
Yes.
How do we solve such problems, especially from being like an image of trained professionals have been tarnished because of that availability of access information? How can young people who are professionally qualified position themselves in a way that can help them being taken serious by the industry,
No, I think it's a very good question. And I'm so glad you asked this question because for weeks now, I've been yearning to go onto the very same social media platforms that you referred to and just share my sentiment about this. But I've resisted the temptation. But the challenge that we're confronted with right now is that there are many false prophets, there are many charlatans, there are many wannabes in this industry. And certainly, and I'm sure at some point in our podcast, we're going to talk about it, but certainly I've noticed that everybody, especially on social media, everybody's suddenly an expert in artificial intelligence. And I know some of these people personally and professionally, and I'm just wondering how overnight people are suddenly all experts when it comes to artificial intelligence, and they're running webinars and they're conducting training sessions and also giving lectures, etc. And I think we had that similar phenomenon. I don't know how intensive the lockdown was of COVID-19 in Zimbabwe, but in South Africa, as I think you understand, was quite extreme. And also during that time, I noticed that suddenly everybody during that time was an expert in remote working. Everybody was an expert in improving productivity levels, working from home, and employee wellness, occupational health and safety, and global pandemics, and even the science behind this sort of global pandemic. But nevertheless, so I think there's a lot of propaganda as opposed to business intelligence in the whole educational training and development sector. And I like what you said, Admire, because for me, the first checkpoint is always your credentials. Um, and whether you talk about mentoring and coaching, for me, the first thing that you have to secure is your coaching credentials, for example. There's an international certification, there's local certifications, but I do believe that you need to earn your stripes through that sort of credentials. And then I was also, as you're presenting or formulating the question, I was reminded of, I often mention this during my management and leadership training programs, is that we have what I would call the credibility formula. So the credibility formula at Maya is very simple for me. It equals integrity plus expertise. Now, for me, these are not negotiable currencies. If you want to position yourself as a coach, for example, I believe you need to have the credentials. You need to have a proven track record. So I think all of us potential coachees or potential clients who would like to their contract to do business with these so-called coaches, I really think that it's important that we do the proper vetting, we do our due diligence, and we ask for testimonials. We say to people, well, we'd love to do business with you, and you're very impressive at superficial level, but please give us that sort of information so we can just double check and make sure that you are indeed this coach of the highest integrity, but also that you will then offer value through your experience, your credentials, and your expertise. And I think, Admire, that's the only way really that we could potentially mitigate against people who are selling themselves as experts. But like I said, I think a lot of them are false prophets. A lot of them are charlatans. A lot of them are fly-by-nights. Particularly if I just look at the training industry in the Southern African market. So when I talk about Southern Africa, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique, Botswana, Lesotho, our friends in Swaziland, Namibia. So all of those countries, we're all suffering because of a high degree of corruption. I want to call it corruption. Corruption in the training industry. And I can share some horror stories with you. I don't want to bore you and your viewers with some of the corruption that I've been exposed to. But it's just basically, if I can just give you one example, where a prospective training provider that is not accredited with any of the formal institutions, for example, the sectoral education training authorities or the QCTO, the Quality Council of Trades and Occupations. So these are the formal regulators of the training industry in South Africa. And a lot of these fly-by-night training providers are not accredited. So they haven't gone through a formal vetting process, their trainers, their learning materials, their business processes, etc. And a lot of them, the barriers to entry, especially in the South African training market, are very low. You literally just have to register a business, which could take you 30 minutes in South Africa. And you have a business registration number. You don't have any formal training accreditation number, but you can start literally trading, and you can start spamming people like yourself. You can start dropping emails, email campaigns. You can start promoting programs on the internet, etc. And what a lot of these companies do is they would go onto LinkedIn and they would steal Admire's profile. They would almost like screenshot it, they would screen grab it, whatever the terminology is, and they would then start pasting your image and your professional profile, your biography. They will start incorporating that into their training brochures. And they will then start, penetrating the market and saying, look, Admire is our facilitator. In 3 weeks' time, he's facilitating this training program. And always there's an exotic training destination. It's always Cape Town or Sandton or, Durban. People love, attending training programs in the coastal towns. And then, of course, our colleagues from Namibia, Swaziland, and Botswana, they sign up, they pay their registration fees, etc. They travel at great cost to South Africa. They get to the training venue and admire there's nothing. The hotel doesn't even know about the booking. Training providers are long gone. And also the money that these people have paid, the delegates. And it's not only bad for the training business in South Africa, but it's also bad for South Africa's reputation, because our ethical barometer score is already so low, and if we have exploitation in the training industry, and I mean that's just one example of how I can literally tell you many times that I'm aware of. It's the tip of the iceberg. I probably don't even know of the hundreds of other times where it's happened, but where people have just alerted me and said, look, are you doing this program? Because I see your profile and your picture and these dates and this venue, this company. And when I look into it, first of all, I don't even know the company. In fact, the very same training dates, I've been booked for something else. So I really think, just to get back to your question, I really think that we need to be vigilant, and we need to do the vetting, and we need to do our due diligence, and we need to make sure that whether it's an individual who's, suggesting that they are the next thing, that can change your business model and can really revolutionize your business practices, I really think we have a sense of duty to make sure that they are indeed legitimate. We can't just, like you said, there's information overload in the just business markets, social media. And, we are bombarded and we are surrounded by false prophets. And we really need to make sure that we check people out before we do business with them.
Now, talking about social media, can you just bundle it up? The impact of social media, such as LinkedIn and all these other platforms where you are present, like SlideShare, how has those platforms, or your presence on those platforms, changed the way you get work and also communicate with stakeholders, like future customers, future strategic partners, and also just to boost your presence online and getting your word out there? How has technology changed the consultants landscape?
It's been revolutionary. I can't give you an exact date. I can't pinpoint when I started intensifying my brand building strategy, because for me, if you say, based on your previous question, you say that the number one critical success factor is your credibility, your expertise and your integrity, etc., then I'm saying, in terms of my business model, if I reflect over the last 20 years or so, it's almost going to be 21 years. Can you believe it? I'll be celebrating my 21st anniversary on the 1st of August. I'm thinking that it has been harnessing and leveraging social media to build what I would call my professional brand equity. And in particular, I think the preeminent platform has been LinkedIn. I'm a bit old school. I'm a typical Generation X. So I would use platforms like Facebook, Twitter, or X as it's known these days, SlideShare that you mentioned. I would say the last 5 or 6 years, although I haven't spent enough time trying to grow my YouTube learning channel, but I would say in particular LinkedIn and Facebook, those have been drivers of boosting my professional reputation, my brand equity. And again, I can't pinpoint it exactly, tell you what the return on that investment is, because if I have to estimate, maybe at that time, at the height of my brand building strategy, I was maybe spending like 4 to 5 hours per day on social media, doing those various posts that you've picked up more recently. And it's all by design. It's all geared towards building my brand equity, etc., and positioning myself. I think you mentioned that with the introduction as the African maverick. I think more and more people are beginning to recognize and identify me as someone who's unconventional, someone who does things differently, but there's certain non-negotiables. Like I said, the integrity and the ethics, for me, those are paramount. And also, I found that I have cut back over the last couple of years in terms of my time consumption, my time expenditure on these social media platforms. But I can honestly tell you easily in the top three, probably number two, in terms of if I had to pinpoint my critical success factors or at least longevity in this very volatile, cutthroat, ultra competitive training market. Probably, if I don't know if you can ask the question, but probably just thinking out aloud, number three on my list would be the quality of relationships that I've been able to build over a number of years. And I think you mentioned that with your introduction, you spoke about that ability to network. And I think for me, that has just been a very critical success factor. So I think for me, those would be the top three. Just as advice to people that are trying to break into the training market, consulting market right now. Those are the three. I'm not saying it's going to work for everybody, but I can only share my journey. And for me, those have been the three deal breakers. It's been the credibility. It's been the brand equity, using social media as a platform to enable that. And also then just the relationships, mutually beneficial relationships. I've been very blessed, admire over the years to partner with some amazing people. I'm really, if you speak to people in this industry, they will tell you if they have to describe me. I think one of the key words that immediately come into that narrative is I'm a collaborator. I'm not a competitor. I'm not competing against anybody. If I am competing, I'm probably competing against myself, just to continually improve from one year to the next, just to master my craft and continue to refine and hone my competency. And I'm really committed to that. Stephen Covey, I think you've read the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He talks about sharpening the sword. So I'm 54 this year. Been doing this for 24 years. So the majority of my adult life and my career span. And I never get to a point where I can rest on my laurels. I really need to continuously work on improving. And I think one of the best things, apart from the autonomy and the freedom that I have, one of the other best things of my job is I get instantaneous and immediate feedback. So at the end of a one-day workshop, you know how it works. I mean, there's training evaluation forms that are completed. At the end of a 3-day program, and I think there's very few jobs that have that kind of sort of value where you can immediately get feedback. So I can immediately internalize that, and I can pick up if there's any areas that I need to improve upon, etc. And also, in the spirit of continuous improvement, I really am committed to continuously work on that. But yeah, just to get back to your question, for me, social media in particular has been a revolution in terms of driving my professional brand equity to a point where even I can see it reflected in not only the number of work assignments, but also, my facilitation fee. I can really see over a number of years how it's grown exponentially from when I started way back when, more than 20 years ago, to where I am today. Again, maybe for your viewers' benefit, I have recently, I think this is what you've picked up on as well. In fact, you've commented on LinkedIn as well. Those different models that I've developed a few years ago, the different types of independent trainer, but then also the high-tech, high-touch training delivery modality, but also the intellect and emotion. I'll gladly share that with your viewers. Again, there are relevant articles, corresponding articles attached to that. Maybe we can just paste the links in the comment section. But more importantly, I think you saw that model as well. I call it the hierarchy of deeds. So it's the independent trainers professional future fitness blueprint. And I've identified a number of levels. I would say the levels are based on the graduated levels are based on differentiation. So if you want to be successful in this training market, for example, you've got to constantly work on shifting those gears and moving up those different levels. And you'll see the two highest levels are the player. So not like as in a romantic player, but like as in like a player in the market, somebody that influences the market. But the pinnacle of this model, and again, there is an image that I'll gladly just drop in the chat box as well. And that's, of course, what I would call a pathfinder. So even beyond a market player, there's a pathfinder. And for me, admire a pathfinder is somebody that gives back to the industry, somebody that pays it forward, somebody that is an innovative thinker, somebody that thinks outside of the box, but also somebody that has, I found that with the Pathfinder, there are three definitive mindsets. The first mindset is a growth as opposed to a fixed mindset. The second one is an investment as opposed to a cost mindset. And the third one is this abundance as opposed to scarcity mindset. So these pathfinders, they give back to the industry. And, just linking it to our earlier discussion, they typically serve as mentors. They coach the young aspirant trainers that are trying to crack the market and trying to also get some traction and a foothold in the very competitive training market. So these are the people that are not selfish, they're selfless, they make a lot of, I was just saying it, Maya, it's very that we have that sort of abundance mindset where we pay it forward and we are able to continue giving back. I think a lot of us have been the benefactors of a lot of generosity within the learning and development community. The industry, for example, has given me a lot. I've been able to travel the world literally, train people from 45 different countries, 5 different continents. Been very privileged to work in over 211 different companies in the in-house training market. Trained over 41,000 learners over the last 24 years. So I've been very blessed in that sense, and even on a daily basis, as recently as last week, I did talk myself up as being a collaborator. So there were 2 other training opportunities. Funny enough, both of them were online. One was on Zoom, the other one was MS Teams. And obviously, I was stuck out in Sandton. I didn't have an opportunity to, physically be in 3 places simultaneously. So I was able, in my training community, I was able to farm that work out to 2 trusted business colleagues and associates. And they then also were able to deliver those training programs to great success. And I think this just contributes to this continuity within the business industry, within the training market. So, I think it's something that we really need to focus on, but we don't parachute. If you go through the article and you look at those levels of differentiation within that hierarchy, you don't just parachute into the pathfinder and the player levels. You really systematically, and I think that's my advice. And I think this is, we'll probably talk about the different workforce generations shortly, but we know the millennials and the centennials, for example, Generation Y, Generation Z. I think the value system, we often label them as being impatient. They want the instant success. And I think, it's a hard sell to those 2 workforce generations. But I think the reality is you can't just parachute into those levels and start earning the top dollar, so to speak. You really have to gradually work yourself up, and you have to prove yourself. You have to develop a track record of success. Even today, I know it's hard to believe, having trained over 41,000 people, even today, as recently as last week, I still keep record of every single training evaluation form. I have it either electronically or I have it saved in the cloud. So at any point, if anybody ever has to question and say, look, I know you say you facilitate these programs, but can we see some learner feedback? I will be able to readily access that. I think I'm way beyond that point, in terms of my brand equity. But just in case somebody does just ask and say, you know what, can we see evidence that you have indeed delivered a high impact training program? I still can provide those training evaluation forms. Can you believe it?
That's you are so different from your typical average trainer or facilitator
Yes,
because I've even noticed the way you are pushing your brand online. It's different, you know. So
yes,
the fact that you are keeping your documents strategically, I wouldn't surprise
yes.
me. You are so like I believe that when you are intentional, you remove
Mm, yeah,
confusion and recklessness, you know, and then
yeah,
there's more
absolutely.
attention being paid in those areas.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like we've been talking about the industry and professionalism. Let's relax a
Yes,
bit.
yes.
Share with us your African dream from an
Mm,
African maverick point of view.
yeah. Look, I think for me, the the dream or the vision should be this independence or autonomy that we have in Africa. For the uniqueness of African problems, we cannot continue to rely and lean heavily on Americanized, Europeanized, and even from Asia, those type of solutions. For the distinctive and unique African problems, and there's the problems that we have in Africa, admire problems that you have in Zimbabwe, you don't find them anywhere else in the world. They are unique, they're distinctive, and therefore we need to come up with uniquely African solutions generated by innovative African thinkers.
Mm.
And we're not going to get the solutions, we're not going to get the answers in European textbooks, American textbooks. So I believe that Africa needs to become a hub of innovative thinking. I mean, how many Zimbabwean expatriates do you have that are achieving unbelievable success in other parts of the world? Think about our colleagues from Nigeria, the diaspora of the Nigerians, and how successful they are, scattered all over the world. I mean, I don't want to isolate certain countries, but we know South Africans, let me pause at that point because I don't want to discriminate against any other African nations. Oh, but you didn't mention our country. Let's say the entire African continent. Let's throw a blanket over for the entire African continent so we don't discriminate. I really think that we have to be a hub of innovation. We have to become more autonomous, more independent with our business practices. And I think that the main focus of your podcast is technology. We have to start being more technologically innovative. And this is why I often say from the management and HR management training perspective, again, that's always going to be my reference point is I'm constantly stimulating, I'm incentivizing, I'm trying to encourage our management and our leadership um, to work more on their TQ and their DQ as opposed to the EQ. Let me explain that briefly. So EQ, we know, is emotional intelligence. And don't get me wrong, that is an important leadership behavioral competency. But what I'm
Mm.
suggesting is let's not fixate on that. We need to start focusing more and investing in advancing our technological literacy, our TQ,
Mm.
but also our digital literacy, our DQ. And this is over and above your financial literacy, your FQ, and also your business literacy, your BQ, because it's pointless to be innovative and to buy into the digitization and technological innovation if you don't have good financial and business management principles. So for me,
Mm.
that's the foundation. But I feel that this is really something that we need to focus more on. This dependence that we have on American technology, European technology, Um, we really need to shift from dependence to interdependence. So maybe initially in the medium term, we can collaborate
mm,
with those very same innovative pioneers. But then at some
mm,
point, I would say within the next 20 to 30 years, we need to shift then to independence, where we can't claim that we have democratic independence. And I mean, you're celebrating that in Zimbabwe today. You cannot claim democratic independence if you don't have technological or digital independence as well, where you have as a
mm,
country, you are autonomous and you are
mm.
the source of innovation. I think we need to shift the source of innovation from America, Europe, and Asia. We need to shift the source to Africa.
Mm, mm, mm. Wow, wow. Thank you for such an
That was
insight.
totally unrehearsed, by the way. That was totally unrehearsed. And that's the first time I've actually said that. So I hope your viewers appreciate this.
it's spot on because from a technological point of view, we need to have our own infrastructure that is independent from the American-based technologies.
Mm,
I was thinking about it like just imagine our message first goes to Ireland, then it comes to South Africa, or it comes to the next city.
yes.
It's just it doesn't make sense. We need to create that independence, and I
Yeah.
think now there are many calls to say let's create our own systems because we have seen
Yeah.
even the abuse. If you're a consumer, you are always under somebody's terms and conditions because we have
Yeah.
nothing of your own. You're just a user of a system that
Yeah.
has been established. I would
Yeah.
like you to I would like
And
you
just
to
before
go
you
back to
continue, can I just
Mm,
interrupt you quickly? I wrote this down. I just want to give you the
mm.
backdrop as well.
Okay.
So I was at Victoria Falls about a year and a half ago, the Zimbabwean side. So I was in your country, and I was
Okay.
invited by the Iron and Steel Engineering Association to give a keynote presentation. Um, and just driving from the airport to, I think it was Elephant Hills, if I'm not mistaken, the venue that was hosting that conference. I spoke to the driver, an amazing gentleman, um, the shuttle driver, and I just wanted to say, but I want to start off my presentation with the term "Rise Zimbabwe" or "Rise Africa, Rise," and gave this word to me, and I hope I got the pronunciation correct, and I hope he gave me the right information. But the word "simukai," he said to
Mhm.
me, I should say Simukai, Zimbabwe, Simukai, Simukai, Africa, Simukai, which loosely translated, my understanding is rise, rise up, Africa,
Mhm.
rise. And that is my
Mhm.
overriding message. Whether we're in Zim or South Africa or Ethiopia or as far afield as Ghana, Nigeria, my friends in Uganda, Simukai, Africa, Simukai, rise,
Mhm.
Africa, rise,
Mhm.
because we are the sleeping giant. Um, and we are in slumber mode right now. We're in flight mode, if I can use a technological term, and we need to thrust ourselves out of that slumber, and we need to start reclaiming our right to innovate, our right to advance technology, because we should be at the forefront of the digitization of our business
Mhm.
practices.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So,
Thank
sorry
you.
for the
Thank you.
interruption. I had to say this. I had to say
Mhm.
smukai. I hope I got the
Yes.
pronunciation correct.
Perfect. It's perfect. Simukai, yes. Rise,
Yes,
rise. You have to,
yes,
you are sitting
yes.
down. Rise, take action. Wake
That
up.
take
Yeah.
action. Yes, yes.
I think I've been honored to have some workshops where I was leading, and what I've noticed
Mm,
as well is as much as you give people top quality frameworks, top quality
mm.
information, content on how to achieve a specific goal. If they don't arise on their own, they will not realize their potential, their goals
Yeah,
in whatever
yeah,
agenda they are trying to. So
yeah.
as much as a facilitator and instructor, it's up to the person who is on the other side
Yeah,
to take what you've
absolutely.
given them
Yeah,
and put it in within themselves
yeah,
and think and
yeah.
say, I must
No, it's true.
use this.
It's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, so when you're presenting, the one word that I was thinking that you're describing is empowerment. That's really the currency as trainers, as business managers that we need to trade in. And I know politicians have distorted this definition. But if you look at the authentic definition of empowerment, empowerment
Mm,
means when you reduce the dependency that you have
mm,
on somebody else. In this case, in Africa, has to reduce that dependency that they have on the Americanized, the Europeanized, and the Asian influences.
mm,
Even the Middle East, we know some of the fastest growing innovation practices. That is the hub. It stems from the Middle East. I forgot to mention them because we know what's happening in the UAE. I've recently been to countries like Saudi Arabia. I've been to Oman. I've
mm,
been to the
mm,
UAE. I mean, it's amazing what those countries are achieving. But the key here at my is empowerment. Africa, for too many management generations and decades, have been relegated and we've been disempowered. And like we said, we must rise up, we must stand up. And I love what you said about we must engage in an action orientation. We cannot
mm,
continue to pay lip service. We cannot just have the rhetoric. The only way to shape, inform, and influence the transformational narrative is to be action orientated. We've got to go, what I would say, from rhetoric to response. And the response must be swift, it must be decisive, and it must be meaningful, and it must be inclusive. Everybody, we must in Africa, the African Union, for example, there must be this critical mass, and we must stand up as a collective, and we must push that agenda of empowerment.
mm. I want us to go back to integrity, especially most of the audience of this podcast are young people who are getting into consultants, who are getting into
Yes.
business leadership. How do we create integrity, maintain it,
Mm,
and
mm,
fix it where it has been destroyed?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. How, how do we go about establishing
yeah.
integrity?
Yeah. I mean, thanks, Admire. It's a very good question. So I think we need to differentiate between personal integrity and professional integrity.
Mm,
So
mm,
the two go hand in hand because, especially those of your viewers that have aspirations of being into a leadership position, although I did see a headline this morning, you probably saw it on LinkedIn, where they are suggesting that, according, I think it was a Deloitte study that suggested that only 6% of the so-called millennial and centennial generation, only 6% of them have this aspiration of being in a leadership position one day, which is quite alarming. But nevertheless, I think it's vitally important when you are in a leadership position. But we've got to look at, there are two frameworks that immediately come to mind in responding to your question. The first one is our friend Stephen Covey, where he talks about the emotional bank account, which is a metaphor for the amount of trust in any relationship. And he compares it to any other financial bank account where you make deposits and you make withdrawals. So for me, we need to focus on those deposits that grow the balance of trust. For me, the cornerstone of integrity is trust, especially those of you in a leadership or aspirant leaders. You have to make those deposits, and you have to guard against and mitigate and almost try to totally eliminate those withdrawals because that depletes the balance of trust. So we need to appreciate by making those deposits, balance of trust, but we can surely we can cut back on those withdrawals and then which contribute to the depreciation of the balance of trust. The other one, and I think your viewers might be familiar with it, is the Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, is what he calls it, his rhetorical triangle. And the rhetorical triangle, loosely translated, he talks about ethos, pathos, and logos. So the logos, he says, if you want to influence or you want to persuade anybody to buy into your business proposal, your vision, your ideas, etc., your strategies, your solutions, you've got to start with the logos. You've got to start with logical thinking. So you've got to go there with your facts, your evidence, your business cases, your cost and benefit analysis, your return on investment metrics, etc. That is how you get people to pay attention, and that's how you get your foot in the door. But according to Aristotle, the logos is inadequate because you have to build on that by looking at the pathos. Now, the pathos is where with the logos, you've won people's minds over, you won over the heads, but now the pathos, you have to win people's hearts over. So you have to win and whisper, I call it whispering and winning people's hearts. You have to indicate and you have to articulate what the benefits are of this business case for that individual. What's in it for them? If you cannot sell the business case and whisper and win over their hearts, the pathos, then you will not influence change. And then the deal breaker for me is the ethos. And that goes exactly back to your question about, loosely translated, the ethics, the integrity. And there, every single one of us, where you are a youngster who's trying to get traction in the business market, or a well-established, seasoned consultant or business manager, you have to promote the integrity. You have to be perceived by the recipient of your messaging that you are is indeed a credible source. So we started off this discussion with credibility. I think we've almost gone full circle now because it goes back to the credibility. You've got to work on your integrity and you've got to work on your expertise. And Maya, I don't know about you, but I'm not prepared to follow somebody or to buy into their ideas, their strategies, if I don't perceive them as being knowledgeable and as being ethical. If this is my criteria as a follower. If I look to admire and I don't see the knowledge, the expertise, and I don't see the integrity, the ethics, I'm not going to follow you, sir. It's as simple as that. I'm not going to follow you, man. I don't want to put a gender bias on it, but that's the reality. So for me, whether you buy into POV's deposits, which grow the balance of trust, or you buy into Aristotle's rhetorical triangle, for me, that's very important that you build the logos, the pathos, but especially you have to work on the ethos. You have to work on your personal and you have to work on your professional integrity. If you're not selling that as your number one leadership currency, as the number one driver of your business proposal, your solution, then I'm saying, sir, man, with all due respect, you are misguided. This for me is critically important.
Thank you for spending much time on this area of consultancy, especially for young people, because that's what they struggle with. And I've seen many, especially established people, using this against the young consultants. Instead of molding them, they would find one of the weaknesses. Maybe it's in the knowledge area, maybe it's in the ethical area, maybe it's in the skill sets. So I'm glad you mentioned it and you explained it in detail. In closing, Dr. Charlse, what do you want to be your legacy, and why would you all choose that specific legacy for people to remember you, maybe when you're gone, or maybe when you retire? What do you want to be known for? Like, if someone say Dr. Charlse Cotter, I know him, then they must say, yeah, what do you want to come to people's minds?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, Admire. So you've probably picked up in all of my social media posts. I'm always trying to conclude these posts, and I'm just scrolling through the documents right now. I just want to make sure I get this word perfect. This, everything else has been unrehearsed, but this is the one thing that because it's got to do with my legacy. This is the one thing that I want to get word perfect. So you've seen from my post, and I'm just going to recite it. Converting raw potential and talent into refined performance excellence for over 24 years. And then, of course, train with excellence, train with Dr. Charlse Cotter, the African Maverick, your training partner of choice. So for me, the legacy is cemented by my learning footprint, by my learning influence. And this is why we haven't spoken much about it, but this is why over the years, I've really freely published my learning content, my learning resources on a platform like SlideShare, for example. I think I have a portfolio of well over 170 different SlideShare presentations of the different training programs that I've facilitated, conference that I've spoken at, etc. And there's additional documents, I think, which takes it to over 180, a portfolio of different documents, my learning perspectives, testimonials, other endorsements, etc. The point I'm trying to make is when I look at the analytics of a platform like SlideShare, it's quite remarkable. Just very loosely, over 1.2 million views of my portfolio of slides that I've uploaded over the last, let's say, 20 years. It might be less than that. I can't remember the exact time when I started using the platform. And when I look at the demographics, for example, because SlideShare Analytics gives you a breakdown and tells you exactly which parts of the world are viewing and downloading those slides, then it brings a lot of joy to my heart because, to be honest with you, there's countries that I may have heard of, but I don't know exactly where those countries are located. Geography wasn't one of my strong points in school. And I then realized that, we all have a certain reach. In a training room, the reach is restricted. On a platform like this, a podcast like this, the reach is restricted. But there are certain platforms 24/7, like SlideShare, and there's no time zone differences that matter because anybody anywhere in the world has access to these YouTube video clips or the posts that you make on Facebook or LinkedIn. But for me, the one that is especially important is SlideShare because, again, it wasn't intentional. It was just me being a talent liberator and me being wanting to expand my learning footprint and my learning influence and just sharing and being generous and collaborating with all of this learning content. And a lot of people have asked me over the years, but why do you do that? Because this is your intellectual property and people can steal it or they can poach it. And I said, you know what? The legacy is defined. For me, my number one legacy is defined by my learning influence and my footprint, which I hope will be timeless. And this is why I've recently, you noticed, and in fact, you commented on, I dredged up some material from my archives dating back to 2014, 2016. And I'd like to test these things. So, you know what? You remember the question I posed is, so, there's been a 10, 12-year time lapse. Is this model still relevant? Is it still applicable? Does it still offer value? And for me, that continuity, that sustainability, the future proofing of my learning resources, my content, I would like maybe one day, maybe the ambition is my great grandchildren. I don't know if I'll get to, that point, but maybe one day my great grandchildren will maybe just stumble or accidentally it'll pop up on their social media timeline and there they will see a presentation by Charlse Cotter, but that's our great-grandfather. And maybe they will look through that, and maybe they will say, you know what, this is quite powerful. This is still relevant. So I've given you a long-worded response, but I think for me that is, as a learning professional, obviously, as a father, as a parent, my legacy will be different. But as a professional learning and development practitioner, that is my number one legacy. That um, the expansion of the learning footprint, the learning influence, not just for today, but also for the future, for many
Mm,
management and HR
mm,
management generations. Hopefully, that'll make a meaningful contribution to somebody's development. And like I said, in the payoff line, that maybe that'll enable the conversion of their raw talented potential into refined performance excellence, or hopefully with more the power skills, maybe that'll make them a better person, but also a better practitioner. That is what I wish. I don't know if I will achieve that, but on a daily basis, that is my pursuit. This is what I'm chasing every single day, the expansion and the continuity of my learning influence and my learning footprint. Thank you, sir.
you are already achieving it, your goal, and your legacy
Yes.
is under construction. So
Thank
I'm
you.
just encouraging you because you already know
Yes.
this. You are achieving impacts. From
Mm.
those posts that I've been reading. I've been recently encouraging people, especially
Yes.
professionals, to document their experiences because LinkedIn
Yes.
users read. We read a lot, and we come there with the hunger to expand our skills, our knowledge, and,
Yes.
and just better
Yes.
ourselves in every way possible. So
Yeah.
thank you for your
Yeah.
resources. I will actually go to your slide share and
Yes.
like go through. I would develop a notebook specifically for your frameworks. I realize they are so
Yes.
complicated. You cannot just peruse
Yes.
them in rush. You need to sit
Yeah.
down,
No. Yeah.
learning like what's happening here step by step. So thank you
Yeah.
so much for your generosity and even the podcast. I was watching your YouTube, very informative. So I believe that
Yeah.
our generation is so blessed to such an extent
Mm.
that if you have focus and you know what you're looking for, you can actually go on the internet and learn and expand your knowledge
Yeah.
and improve your
Yeah.
professionalism and become a better person in whatever area you are trying
Yeah.
to improve. So thank
Yeah.
you so much for making time for the
No, no, it's a great
podcast.
pleasure,
And,
Maya. And just before you sign off, I just want to say thank you to you, not just for the invitation and just the opportunity and the platform again, just to share my experience and my journey as a professional trainer over the last 24 years. I really do appreciate that, and I just want to give you a bit of credit as well. I know that you specializing in the ICT space and technology space, and your target market is maybe a different generation to my generation, but hopefully that the evergreenness of the messaging is prevalent. But I just want to wish you good luck. I have followed your YouTube channel, and thank you for reciprocating. I think we'll continue to support one another, and I'll continue to actively promote your quest towards this um, sort of learning message that you want to share with a particular generation. And I'm reassured by the fact that it's not just restricted to the Zimbabwean audience. I think we know these are global platforms, and I just want to encourage you to continue to preach the good news, but also to continue to do the good work that you are doing, because you are very inspirational. You're a very remarkable young man, and we can all learn a lot from your enthusiasm, your motivation, your energy, your energies. I mean, I watched some of your YouTube clips. I watched you in action as you presented various and facilitated various workshops. The
mm,
energy is off the charts. The energy is infectious. It's contagious. And I just hope that not just your energy, but also your learning content can also become viral.
Thank you.
on
Thank
a
you.
global platform.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
I
you so
salute
much.
you.
Thank you so much for the kind words and your validation. It's important,
Yes,
it's like a signpost of saying you are
yes,
going in the right direction, and thank you so
absolutely.
much.
Yes.
So
No, it's a great
yeah, let's
pleasure.
let's continue to
Mm.
collaborate. If you have any
Yes,
posts any competitions, anything that needs people to participate,
yes,
just send the links.
yes.
And that's the
Mm.
beauty of digital platforms. The links, it's a
Yeah,
matter of
yeah,
sending the link,
yeah,
sending the whatever codes.
yeah.
And I also feel that
Sure.
there is a lot of, you see, like the content that we put on platforms also attract
Mm.
bad energy. Maybe people are
Mm.
jealous of, they want to be doing what you're doing. So is I'm always saying, the same window that brings the sunlight can also bring mosquito. So you must
Yeah,
just be prepared to deal with
yeah,
both the blessings
yeah.
and the
I
challenges.
think, over the years, as a trainer in particular, I know you've done a lot of training as well. We become thick-skinned. I don't want to say that we are bulletproof. Hopefully, we are future-proof. We might not be bulletproof because we are, after all,
Mm,
human beings, and
mm,
we do have emotions, and we all have emotional hot triggers and buttons and things like that. But I do agree with you. You have to cut through all of that noise. There's a lot of noise on social media, and you've got to cut through that. And you've got to be able to, I love your choice of word, you've got to be able to focus on the positive energy and focus on those people who care about you, interested in you, people that you can benefit from, people that, are interested in your well being. I think those are the people
mm,
that you need to listen to. Those are the people that you need to pay attention to. Those are the people where you need to internalize their messaging, and you just need to deflect all the negative energy. I think easier said than done, but um, I think it's a test of your character. It's a test of your resilience. If you are
mm,
able to um, be bulletproof, um, you know, you got to have that Teflon jacket. Nothing sticks to you. If um,
mm,
if you don't have that Teflon jacket, then you're gonna suffer from mental health challenges because, like you said, there's a lot of toxic, negative energy online. Um, I don't know. Our
yeah.
friends on X, I
Mm,
don't know what's happening there. It's the former Twitter. It for me. It's just it becomes a melting pot for negative energy. It doesn't seem
mm,
there's anything positive on Twitter at the moment. It's just people just complaining about huge issues. But yeah, so Admire, thanks again for your time and thanks for the invitation. Once you publish it on YouTube or any of the other platforms, just let me know. So in the comment section, I don't know how you want to do it, but all of these links that I spoke about, those models, the difference
Can
between
you can
mentoring
you
and
can you
coaching.
send them now? Um,
Okay,
uh, by let's say tomorrow at 10 a.m.
okay,
The
okay,
episode should be
okay,
out. Yeah.
okay.
So we will factor
How
in
should I send it to you? On our
via
LinkedIn
LinkedIn.
chat. Okay,
Yes,
all right.
yes, yes.
I'll send you
I see
those links and those.
we still
Yes.
we still have 2 minutes left.
Okay.
I just if you are open to it, I just wanted you to share on
Mm.
how to correctly use LinkedIn from your experience, to build
Yeah.
connections, relationships, and also what to do, what not to do in a nutshell
Yeah.
for the time that we
Yeah.
have left.
Look. Yeah. No. I think unfortunately, you're asking the wrong person. I know that there's a science attached to it. I haven't attended any training or any formal tuition in terms of how to harness LinkedIn. So they often debate, between science and art. And for me, it's just been an art. It's just been a creative platform that I've used to showcase my learning contribution, but also, like you said, there is a business motive because I do want to build my professional brand equity, etc. I do want to build my network. I have stopped actively, chasing a bigger network. I think I got to about 13,500 followers, which I think is a lot for some people, but a lot of people will embarrass me with their followership. But it's not something that I've actively chased. I feel that, the people that I have currently on my network are value-adding collaborators. So unfortunately, I can't give any tools, techniques, or tips on the scientific side, because I know to boost the algorithm and to get more views and more impressions, I think you've got to work with, my only advice is to work with somebody who's a specialist in that, because I know there are scientific principles and how to, expand your viewership and your followership, etc. I'm just one of those guys that sees it more as an artistic platform, and I just, connect and I collaborate and I communicate and I showcase and I, use that to share my learning voice, my resources, my platform, my message. I just use that to echo my learning message, but I don't have any formal sort of tuition or I just grown organically, and it's just on common sense and logical thinking. I can't tell you that there's a specific route that you need to follow.